Well, good morning. Looking forward to continuing the story of my relationship with uh, the Voice for God, which involved with my study of A Course in Miracles, a newfound relationship with Father God, and a newfound relationship and a growing relationship with a brother, Jesus. Jesus actually came to me in several ways. I accept all hallucinations of sort. I had a recurring vision that would come to me often when I was praying and many times crying. I was in the vision on my knees in prayer, and I would feel a hand on my left shoulder. The hand encouraged me to stand up, and it was really interesting. Always in this vision, I never would look directly at Jesus, but I was aware that he was on my left, holding my arm and walking me to the edge of this precipice. And we get to the edge of this cliff with a very big view of a distant horizon. And always he would put his right hand out, pointing to the horizon, like we have work to do. And I remember typically, not always, but typically in the vision, he would take my left hand in his right hand, and then we would sort of step off the cliff together, like we were going to go flying out to take care of our mission of service. And another dream, which was pointed because when I was a child, to escape my very troubled life in my dreams, I learned two things. I learned how to breathe underwater so I could escape the monsters or the Nazi soldiers or whatever. And I learned how to fly. And as a boy, in my dreams, in the flying, I would just sort of run and take off Superman style and fly up over the trees. And some of these flights, it was just quite majestic. But typically, again, the theme of it was to escape danger, because my life was emotionally filled with great danger. So now as a 36-year-old man, dealing with the death of my little sister, and just sort of seeing everything crumbling around me, here poised out in St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin, middle of USA, far away from the rest of my family. Anyway, the dream started coming back to me, but in the dream, instead of being able to just run and take off and fly, Jesus was showing me how to lift my hands up and grab something, really grabbing the air, pulling myself up. I'd go up a few feet, do it again. I'm up. So I would do that maybe 5 times until I'm about 15, 20 feet off the ground. And then I would just rotate over into the Superman position and start to fly. So this happened often enough where I was writing quite a bit about this theme in my life of Jesus teaching me how to fly. And you remember, of course, from before, telling you about the helicopter dream. So I remember writing a short book at the time called Flying Lessons. And it had a lot to do with my little sister and us growing up and playing on the beach in Cape Cod. And, all the things that we shared as the 2 youngest in the family. We had a very, very close relationship. And anyway, so the day that my sister left her body, I informed my mother, or sort of asked her, but please, Mom, I'd like to do Lynn's eulogy. And she said, of course, you would be the best one to do that. And so I remember as the day approached, it took about 3 or 4 weeks before we hold the memorial service together. Yet having my other two sisters and my mom and myself kind of coordinating the service with the minister in our congregational church. And yeah, I remember just thinking to myself, like, wow, Jody wanted to take care of the music selections and all of that. And that was all fine. My thing was just to get up and give the eulogy. And, it's interesting because I thought at first, boy, I got to take some notes and kind of organize what I'm going to say. And everything I wrote down just seems very wooden, very contrived, stupid. And I just had this growing sense that there wasn't any way that I could prepare to give this talk. I had to trust that the voice for God would be there to use me. And I just remember, even though I was very nervous, trusting that. In fact, when I got up to the podium after a piece of music, I was shaking so hard I actually took this glass of water to try to take a drink because my lips were totally dry. And I couldn't do it. I was shaking so badly I couldn't get the water to my mouth. So I put the glass down and I stood there for a minute and looked out over this audience. Oh, I forgot to mention that that one of the things that was happening, we were waiting in the family area. They always have a room in the church for the family to sit together, the close family, when doing a memorial service. And we were going to have the service in the chapel because we expected a pretty small crowd. We hadn't lived in this small town for many years, but for my father, he still lived in the town. But my mother, after the divorce, lived in another part of Connecticut. And of course, Jody and Sandy and I had all moved further away across the country. So we expected a pretty small crowd. Well, maybe 10 minutes before the memorial service was supposed to begin, someone came in and talked to the minister, and the minister came over and talked with us. I said, there's a very big crowd showing up, and so we're going to have to move the service to the main sanctuary, which they did. So it took maybe another 15, 20 minutes to move everybody, move the flowers. So now, for whatever reason, I think, oh, wow, this is even going to be a bigger opportunity for me to get up and give the talk of my life, even though, and again, like I said, I pretty much had surrendered. It wasn't going to be my talk. It was going to be the talk that the Voice for God would have me give. Because I knew that in some way I had to make this an uplifting talk about celebrating Lynn's life, even though it appeared to end tragically. So anyway, when I finally got up there, I was so nervous, and I looked out over the audience, and it was an amazing thing. It probably took all of 3 seconds, but it seemed to me like 10 minutes. Just looking over the faces in the crowd, because everybody was there. It was like suddenly, here I am, more or less 20 years after the fact, after leaving high school, never came back to this town, but they were all there, all classmates, teachers, neighbors, many, many familiar faces. And in the very back row, there he was. Sometimes it's the third way that Jesus would come to me, is in a hallucination like this, where I saw him and I always visualized him. I had seen him in some of the visions where when I did look at his face, he looked like Robert Conrad, an actor at the time, or when I was a child, in a favorite TV show of mine, Wild Wild West. Robert Conrad, real handsome guy. Anyway, this is the appearance. If I ever looked at his face, this is the appearance that Jesus had, was Robert Conrad. Anyway, he was there in the back row when, you're going to be great. And so I think, in fact, they had me up there before singing Amazing Grace. So I think minister had everybody sing Amazing Grace. And because I remember looking, and I think it was before I started talking, this helped me calm down. I remember looking at my father in the front row, and he was crying like a baby. And that really opened my heart and helped me just realize that I had the opportunity to give him and everybody else in that room a great blessing. And so I started talking, and I don't really have any memory of what I said. It was kind of like I was in a trance, but I could feel what was happening, and I could see in many people's faces. I remember seeing my Uncle Joe crying and lots of people crying. But it was a beautiful talk, and it was really about celebrating. I remember saying something like, you know, Lynn's life to me was worth celebrating because of her honesty, because she was dealing with a very painful life, and she dealt with it honestly, because I think so many people can relate to being so depressed and so out of control. And she wanted out. And I think we see today, in a very troubled time that we're in, that so many young people, middle-aged people, old people, so many people are choosing to end their lives because it's just too much. It's too painful. So I've always been, since that time, always been an advocate of assisted suicide and supporting people in that choice to drop their body if they're in so much pain, physical pain, emotional pain. It's not there's nothing in me that feels this is wrong or should not be. It was such an honor for me as Lynn's older brother to support her in this, in the way that her life ended. And so here we were. I remember after the service, people going through the reception line, shaking my hand and going, "That was so beautiful. That was amazing." And you could see in their eyes that something really remarkable had happened. They had been touched, okay, by the voice for God. As had I. I was in La La Land. I was just like in this euphoric state of like, this is the most amazing thing that I could ever experience. And I knew that it would be this opportunity, because how often do you get to stand up before all of your past and speak your truth? Remarkable opportunity. Again, I've never had anything like that since.